Hey guys, my name is Aaron, and I want to go over an article that our friends over at JoyPac, Falco Bocker, wrote. It's common cultural differences when publishing games in China, and we here at APPTUTTi publish mobile games and mobile apps in China. In case you didn't know, so we wanted to go through this article. You can obviously find the article in the description below, and we wanted to give some of our thoughts and feedback on the article. So let's get into it. So Falco starts by talking about the Chinese market and how it is massive, which is true. It's now the largest single language market on the planet, 3 times bigger than the US. So to put that in perspective, he talks about how China has 242 million iOS devices, which is pretty much the same number of total mobile phones in the US. And that's just iOS devices. And then he talks about how it should be rich pickings for game developers, but of course it's not that simple. The Chinese market is not as simple as the Western one. So he goes into the differences here. So the first one he mentions is the government regulation and censorship laws, which we talk about often in conferences that we attend. When we give speeches, we talk about some of the barriers to entry to the Chinese mobile market. One of them is the governmental regulation. So it boils down to a few things. Any sort of content that is being brought into China cannot include pornography, acts of gratuitous violence, drugs, political speech, and overall just gore. And he talks about another part as well, which you need publication numbers, so IP certificates and ISBN licenses or publication licenses. Now, in order to release your games in China, you will need these. And unfortunately, only a Chinese entity with the right governmental license can apply for one. Luckily, APPTUTTi are here as that Chinese entity, the same as what JoyPac are doing. So our companies such as JoyPac, APPTUTTi, we help developers enter China because without a Chinese entity, it's almost impossible. In fact, I would say it's pretty much impossible. Another thing he talks about is the translation, the cultural differences. It's not just simply putting your text into Google Translate and translating that. There are certain terms and translations that don't quite match up. So this is where you need a localization team or people that are familiar with the game language as well as the local Chinese language to really translate your game in order to make it best for the local users. Now, we here at APPTUTTi do translate the first 1,000 words of each project that is submitted to us, and we don't use Google Translate, of course. We have professional translation for those apps and games to make sure that the Chinese users are having a great experience. He goes on to talk about a example here of Fluffy Fall, which seems to be a casual game of just falling and avoiding obstacles. What they helped Fluffy Fall with when entering China was the localization. They helped with changing 3 of its characters to reflect the Lunar New Year celebrations, for instance, also known as Chinese New Year. And this type of localization really helped this game increase its UA as well as the retention of the game, and it got over 1 million downloads in China alone, which is great. Now, in-app purchases are popular, but they work differently. So he goes on to say that people in China pay for everything with their mobile, which is a fact. I personally pay for everything with my mobile: my rent, my utilities, my taxis, my food. When I'm going out to eat, I haven't carried cash in years. So he says players in China spend 50% more on in-app purchases than players in the rest of the world. So they're really willing to spend money on games that they enjoy, which is great. Now, for instance, what Falco doesn't mention is the fact that in-app purchase games can be difficult to publish in China. I believe that JoyPac and Falco's perspective is mainly from an iOS publishing. What we do here at APPTUTTi is we reach the Android market, so the market that Google Play hasn't covered, which includes hundreds of app stores and is around 80% of the market share. Now, if you wanted to release an in-app purchase game on the Android stores, you will need two documents. On behalf of a Chinese entity, you would need an IP protection certificate and as mentioned before, a publishing license or an ISBN license. And these can take a while for the processing. It can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. Now, what we like to encourage our partners that have in-app purchase games is to make a ads monetization model, like change your game into an ads monetization revenue model, and that way you can be published in a much shorter time. And while you're waiting for these documents, you can start growing users in China as well as making money from ads. He goes on to talk about the tech giants in China, which I'm sure a lot of people outside of China may not have heard of. So Tencent and NetEase are responsible for 100% of the top 10 games in the Chinese market. ByteDance is TikTok. It's the parent company of TikTok. So its main entertainment is news and advertising for Chinese users. Alibaba is the biggest e-commerce platform in China. You may have, if you want to know more about Alibaba, you can watch our What is 11/11 video, which talks about Taobao and the Singles Day, which is the biggest shopping festival in the world. And lastly, he mentions Baidu, which is essentially the Google of China, which is around 80% of the country's search traffic. So it's no secret that over the last couple of years, casual and hyper-casual games are becoming more and more popular. And he goes on to mention, just like any game trying to enter China, they need to be optimized in terms of their business side. And having a publisher which is familiar with the market can really help you to make the most of your game in this lucrative market. I couldn't have said it better, Falco. So finding a local partner is really essential for people that are wanting to publish their games in China. So he goes on to mention that if all of this information has got you panicking and is like, I have no idea how I'm going to enter China now, he says, don't worry. It is a massive market, and unlike Europe, everyone in it speaks the same language and has the same cultural background. So if your game can tap into something that resonates in China, you will see profits just rolling in because of the huge player base with the similar wants and similar desires. And he goes on to mention friends with benefits. So a Chinese partner which understands the market and the players within it is ideally placed to help you with localization. They can also go one step further and help you with funding and marketing support. Some Chinese publishers will add your game with new content and features to make sure it appeals to the masses. So as Falco says, entering China can be really easy if you have this friends with benefits. I'm not quite sure I would say that's the relationship, but if you find a Chinese partner to help you publish your games, it's really one of the only ways into the Chinese market. Now, I read this article and I've met Falco a couple of times, and I thought he made a very good summary of the cultural differences as well as publishing in China, and we wanted to showcase this to you with some of our thoughts in a video form. So thank you guys very much for watching. What do you think about publishing in China? Do you still think it's difficult? Will you try and do it by yourselves, or will you use a local Chinese partner such as APPTUTTi? Leave a comment below and we will see you in the next video.